It was a busy afternoon at a huge, fancy shopping mall. The mall was filled with designer stores and rich people showing off their fancy clothes and jewelry. In the middle of all the hustle and bustle, a man walked into one of the most expensive clothing stores. He was wearing simple clothes, a hoodie and jeans, nothing that would stand out in such an expensive place. His calm presence didn't attract much attention, but a group of teenagers lounging near the entrance noticed him right away. Among these teenagers was Jacob, a rich, arrogant teen who loved to show off. He had expensive designer clothes, a flashy watch, and a cocky attitude. He was used to being the center of attention and didn't like it when people, especially poor-looking ones, dared to step into his world of wealth and luxury. When Jacob saw the man walking into the store dressed in casual clothes, he immediately started to laugh. "Look at that guy," Jacob said loudly, turning to his friends. "Why would someone like him even step foot in this store? Does he really think he can afford anything here?" His friends chuckled along with him, all of them laughing at the man without even knowing who he was. But the man, whose name was Keanu, didn't seem to care about their mocking. He just kept walking, moving calmly through the store. His face showed no anger or embarrassment. He seemed completely unbothered by the rude remarks being made about him. He was focused on something else, a rack of finely tailored suits hanging nearby. Jacob, seeing how calm and unaffected Keanu was, grew more bold. His laughter grew louder, and he made the decision to get a bit closer to the man and mock him even more. "Hey, buddy," Jacob called out, walking toward Keanu with a mocking smile. "Are you lost? The discount store is just a couple of blocks down the street." Keanu turned to him slowly, his expression calm and unreadable. He didn't get angry or defensive. Instead, he simply replied, "I'm exactly where I need to be." Jacob, not expecting such a calm response, raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Oh really?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You planning to buy something here? Because I gotta say, these suits don't exactly scream clearance rack." The store clerk, who had been standing nearby, heard the exchange and was unsure of what to do. She saw the tension between the two and wasn't sure whether she should step in. But Keanu's calmness caught her attention. She decided to approach him and ask if she could help. "Can I help you, sir?" the clerk asked politely. Keanu turned to her and smiled softly, ignoring Jacob's comments. "Yes," he said. "I'm looking for a suit. Something classic. Well-fitted." Jacob burst into laughter, his loud voice echoing throughout the store. "A suit for you?" Jacob scoffed. "This is gold. Do you even know how much these things cost?" Keanu didn't react. Instead, he turned back to the clerk, pointing at a dark charcoal-colored suit on display. "I'll try this one," he said quietly. The clerk, sensing that something unusual was going on, nodded and took him to the fitting room. As Keanu disappeared into the changing area, Jacob and his friends exchanged whispers and laughs. "This is going to be hilarious," Jacob muttered under his breath. "There's no way this guy can afford that suit." As they waited for Keanu to come back, Jacob leaned against a display case, clearly confident that he was going to have the last laugh. "You know," Jacob said, raising his voice again, "you should probably check his pockets before he leaves. Guys like that don't come here to buy anything. They come here to steal." The store clerk, now looking uncomfortable, frowned but didn't say anything. She didn't know what to do. Before she could respond, Keanu stepped out of the fitting room, looking completely different. The suit he had tried on fit him perfectly. It was a tailored suit, and it looked like it had been made just for him. He adjusted the collar and turned to the clerk. "This is perfect," Keanu said with a small smile. Jacob's laughter stopped immediately. He wasn't expecting the man to look so confident and well put together. For a moment, Jacob was unsure of what to say. But his arrogance quickly returned. "Nice try," Jacob said, crossing his arms. "But now comes the fun part. Let's see if you can actually pay for it." Keanu gave him a calm look, his expression still unreadable. "I'll take this one," he said simply, pointing to another suit on the rack. "And a few others as well." The atmosphere in the store grew tense. Jacob's smirk faltered. His friends exchanged confused looks. "A few others?" Jacob repeated, though his voice was shaky now. "Yeah, right. I bet your credit card will bounce before you even get out of here." Keanu didn't respond to him. He simply turned to the clerk, who was still unsure of what to make of the situation. "Can you ring these up for me?" he asked politely, gesturing toward the suits, shirts, and ties he had chosen. The clerk nodded and began scanning the items, but her hands were trembling slightly. She glanced at Jacob, who was still staring at Keanu in disbelief. The total price of the items added up quickly. "That will be $15,000, the clerk said softly, her voice betraying her own shock. Jacob let out a low whistle. $15,000? He said, shaking his head. This is going to be good. But what happened next left everyone in complete silence. Keanu reached into his wallet and pulled out a sleek, black credit card. He handed it to the clerk, who took it carefully and ran it through the machine. For a brief moment, the whole store stood still, and everyone watched in anticipation. The register beeped, and the clerk looked up at Keanu with wide eyes. Transaction approved, she announced, her voice barely audible. Jacob froze. His jaw dropped, and his mind couldn't process what had just happened. His friends, who had been laughing a moment ago, now stood speechless, staring at Keanu and the store clerk in shock. Jacob could barely speak. He stammered. How did you? Keanu gave him a small, calm smile. Looks can be deceiving, he said simply, turning away from Jacob and walking past him with quiet confidence. The clerk started to pack Keanu's items into a bag. Jacob stood frozen, unsure of what to do. His world had just been turned upside down. The truth was, he hadn't just been mocking any random man. He had been laughing at one of the most famous actors in the world, Keanu Reeves. He hadn't even recognized him. The store owner, who had been watching the scene from the back of the store, finally stepped forward. Mr. Reeves, he said warmly, extending his hand. It's an honor to have you in our store. Thank you for choosing us today. Jacob's face turned pale. He blinked, trying to process the words. Mr. Reeves? He whispered, his voice barely a breath. Keanu Reeves? Keanu nodded politely and shook the store owner's hand. Thank you for the excellent service, he said, glancing at the clerk who had helped him. You've been very helpful. The store owner smiled. Anything for you, sir, he said, clearly thrilled to meet such a big celebrity. Jacob was completely speechless. He had spent the entire time mocking someone who was, in fact, one of the most famous and humble celebrities in the world. He felt embarrassed, humiliated, and small. Keanu gathered his bags, turned, and walked toward the door. Before he left the store, he paused and looked back at Jacob. I hope you learned something today, Keanu said quietly, and with that he left the store. Inside the store there was a heavy silence. Jacob still couldn't believe what had just happened. He stood there, frozen, as his friends exchanged awkward glances. No one knew what to say. The entire situation had turned upside down so quickly that they were all left speechless. The store clerk, who had witnessed everything, walked up to Jacob. Her voice was soft but firm as she spoke. You really shouldn't treat people like that, she said. It doesn't matter how someone dresses or looks. Respect is the least you can give. Jacob, still struggling with his embarrassment, tried to speak, but he didn't have the words. The clerk looked at him with a mix of disappointment and pity. You thought he wasn't worth your time because of his clothes, she said. But guess what? He just taught all of us a lesson. Jacob's face turned red. He had always been proud of his confidence, but now, for the first time, he felt small and insignificant. His confidence had turned into shame. Outside the store, Keanu was still walking through the mall. As he passed a fountain, he saw a young mother sitting on a bench with her little girl. The girl, no older than 6, was holding a small, worn-out doll. Her mother was counting coins in her purse, trying to make sure she had enough money to buy something small for her daughter. Keanu paused for a moment, watching them quietly. Then, without saying a word, he walked past them, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the world wasn't always fair. But one thing was clear, respect and kindness could change everything. Keanu's expression became softer as he watched what was happening. He walked quietly over to the little girl and crouched down to her level. That's a beautiful doll you have, he said gently. The little girl smiled shyly and held the doll a little tighter. Thank you, she said. Keanu looked at the girl's mom, who was surprised to see him. Can I help you with anything? He asked kindly. The mom hesitated, feeling a little embarrassed. Oh no, we're just trying to save up for a small treat for my daughter, she said in a soft voice. Keanu thought for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp bill. He handed it to the mom. Here, he said. Buy her something special today. The mom's eyes grew wide in surprise. Oh, I couldn't. This is too much, she said. But Keanu shook his head with a warm smile. Please, he said. It's the least I can do. And remember, kindness is a gift that costs nothing. As Keanu got up to leave, Jacob and his friends were watching from a distance. They had followed him from the store and saw how kind he was. Jacob felt a little bad. This wasn't the arrogant celebrity he thought Keanu would be. Keanu cared about others no matter who they were. Jacob took a deep breath, then called out to Keanu. Mr. Reeves, he said, his voice shaking a little. Keanu turned and looked at him calmly. Yes, he asked. Jacob felt nervous, but he wanted to say something. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he said quietly. I shouldn't have judged you like that. Keanu looked at him for a moment and then nodded. Apology accepted, he said simply. But remember, it's not me you should apologize to. It's yourself. Judging people just shows our own insecurities. Jacob nodded, feeling the words hit him. Thank you, he said in a soft voice. Keanu smiled gently before turning and walking away into the crowd. Jacob stood there for a moment, thinking about what Keanu had said. His friends, who had been laughing at him earlier, were now standing next to him, not sure what to say. Finally, one of them spoke. Man, I can't believe that was Keanu Reeves, he said, shaking his head. You really messed up. Jacob sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, I know, he admitted. I was such an idiot. He looked back at the store where the clerk was still working, finishing up with a customer. For the first time in a long time, I feel bad about how I acted. He turned and walked back into the store with his friends following him. The clerk looked up, surprised to see him again. Forget something? She asked with an eyebrow raised. Yeah, Jacob said, his voice quieter than before. I forgot my manners. He paused before continuing. I owe you an apology. And maybe a thank you. You were right about everything. I shouldn't have judged him or acted like I'm better than anyone else. The clerk blinked, surprised. Well, she said after a moment, apology accepted. But words mean nothing if you don't change how you treat people. Jacob nodded. You're right, he said. And I'm going to start right now. He turned to his friends and motioned for them to follow. Come on, he said as he walked toward the counter. I've got an idea. Jacob reached into his wallet, pulled out his credit card and handed it to the clerk. Put a $500 gift card on this, he said. The clerk hesitated. For who? She asked. For the next customer who needs it, Jacob said firmly. Just tell them it's from someone who knows how it feels to make a mistake. His friends stared at him, surprised. Dude, are you serious? One of them asked. Yeah, Jacob said, smiling just a little. It's the least I can do. Keanu didn't just buy some clothes today. He bought a lesson for all of us. And I don't want to waste it. As the clerk processed the payment, Jacob felt a strange feeling of relief. He had never done anything like this before, but for the first time, it felt like the right thing to do. As he was about to leave, he saw the little girl and her mom sitting on a bench near the store. They were sharing an ice cream cone and laughing together. Jacob stopped and watched them for a moment. The simple joy on their faces made him realize that even a small act of kindness could make a big difference. Without thinking, he walked over to them. Excuse me, he said, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. I just wanted to say you have a great kid. And if there's anything else you need, let me know. I'd be happy to help. The mom looked up at him, surprised. Thank you, she said softly. Jacob nodded and turned to leave, feeling lighter than he had in a long time. As he rejoined his friends, one of them gave him a pat on the back. Looks like you're turning over a new leaf, he joked. Yeah, Jacob said, laughing a little. Guess it's about time. But deep down, Jacob knew this was just the beginning. Days later, the story about what happened at the mall spread everywhere. People were talking about Keanu Reeves and how kind he had been. It even showed up on social media. One post said, Keanu Reeves humbles an arrogant teen, and showed a picture of him leaving the store with his bags. Jacob's actions didn't go unnoticed either. The clerk told people about the $500 gift card Jacob had left, and some customers who had received it shared their thanks online. Comments like, whoever did this, thank you for restoring my faith in humanity, began to appear everywhere. Jacob sat with his friends at their usual hangout spot, scrolling through the comments on his phone. A small smile appeared on his face as he read the nice things people were saying. For the first time he felt proud, not because of his money or fame, but because he had made a real difference. Hey man, one of his friends said, nudging him. Looks like your story is blowing up. People actually think you're a good guy now. Jacob laughed. Yeah, well, I've got Keanu to thank for that. If he hadn't put me in my place, I'd probably still be the same arrogant jerk. At the same time, Keanu was sitting at a quiet cafe on the other side of town. He was sipping his coffee and reading a book when a young woman walked up to him, looking a little nervous. Excuse me, Mr. Reeves, she said softly. Keanu looked up and gave her a kind smile. Yes. The woman looked at him, her voice shaking. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. I was in the mall the other day with my daughter, and your kindness meant more to us than you'll ever know. Keanu's smile grew warmer. I'm glad I could help, he said simply. The world needs more kindness. Pass it on when you can. The woman nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. I will, she promised. Back at the mall, the kindness Keanu showed was still being felt. The store clerk, inspired by what she had seen, began saving part of her paycheck to start a kindness fund for customers in need. Even Jacob, who used to be known for being arrogant, started volunteering at a local shelter and using his money to help others. One day, while helping at the shelter, Jacob saw a familiar face. Keanu was there, quietly helping serve food. Jacob stood still for a moment before walking over to him. "Mr. Reeves," Jacob said, his voice full of respect. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. You didn't just teach me a lesson. You changed my life." Keanu smiled and put a hand on Jacob's shoulder. "You changed your life," he said. "I just gave you a nudge." Jacob watched Keanu continue to serve meals, and in that moment he realized that true wealth wasn't about money or fame. It was about the way you touched other people's lives. And right then he promised to carry on the lesson he had learned. Kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.